Heaven and Earth, an internet radio talk show where we help you connect spirit and divine guidance. Lisa Kay, your host, brings you shows that can enhance and transform your life with tips and new ideas for more happiness, abundance, and better relationships. Lisa is an expert on intuition and can show you how to strengthen your inner guidance to empower yourself. Each show is positive and uplifting to inspire your day. Her guest speakers are specialists on self-help, positive thinking, spirituality, and conscious living. Be the best that you can be with Between Heaven and Earth, conscious living for your soul.
Listening to Between Heaven and Earth Radio, and we are here every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, live, and we bring you some wonderful guests just to help you get some new ideas and enhance your life with some tips and tools that you can take away after our show. Our show today is called The Greatest Invention in Human History is Aging. The U.S. Census Bureau says that in 2010, people aged 65 and over grew to 40 million. By 2030, and that's only 14 years from now, this group will represent nearly 20% of the total U.S. population. And that would be 1 out of every 5 people you see on the street. We look at those statistics of the, quote, older population, and if you're young, you're going to think, well, that's not me. Well, not for a while at least. Or if you're in your 40s or your 50s, you think, that's soon to be me. And if you're over 65, you're already there. The future of being older is changing, and our guest, Dr. Bill Thomas, is spearheading that change. In 1991, Dr. Thomas went from being an emergency room physician to the medical director of a nursing home in upstate New York. And Dr. Thomas recalls, quote, "The place was depressing, with old people parked in wheelchairs like frogs on a log, bored with nothing to do, just waiting for death to finally reach them. It was horrible. So he did the unthinkable. He persuaded the facility and staff to get 2 dogs, 4 cats, several hens and rabbits, and 100 parakeets, along with hundreds of plants, a vegetable and flower garden, and a daycare site for staffers' kids. And at the same time, there were laws prohibiting animals in nursing homes. But they went ahead anyway. So before I bring Dr. Thomas on to tell you the rest of the story, let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Thomas has become an internationally recognized expert on aging. Dr. Thomas has been written about in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and many other media outlets on revolutionizing what he calls elderhood. The Wall Street Journal called Dr. Thomas one of America's top 10 innovators. He is traveling across the country, gaining the support of people everywhere he goes, successfully producing radical changes in how we take care of ourselves as we approach the end phase of life. He is successfully challenging, even disrupting, the long-accepted attitudes that people hold about getting older. He is helping millions of people help themselves. Dr. Bill Thomas is an Ashoka Fellow and winner of the Hens Award for the Human Condition. He created the Eden Alternative, an international nonprofit, and the Greenhouse Project, both models to revolutionize nursing home care. In addition to teaching, speaking, and consulting internationally, he is currently a senior fellow of AARP's Life Reimagined Institute, a graduate of the State University of New York and Harvard Medical School. He lives in Ithaca, New York, with his family. Dr. Thomas is on a mission to change our way of thinking about being old. We shouldn't live in fear of it, and our elder years truly should be our golden years. So welcome, Dr. Thomas. I'm really excited you're here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Lisa.
What an amazing story. It starts out with bringing in 2 dogs, 4 cats, several hens, rabbits, and 100 parakeets. I kind of left people hanging there. Could you kind of help us continue that story? What was that all about?
Well, actually, all of that work was derived from an observation that actually is easy to make but hard in essence, to do anything about. As you mentioned in the intro, I actually came out of the field of emergency medicine and really wasn't properly trained and prepared originally to be a geriatrician. And so when I started my work in long-term care, I was sort of like, hey, what is this? Why is it like this? This doesn't make sense. And in particular, I was very moved and in some ways very grieved by what I saw as the plagues of loneliness, helplessness, and boredom. So, that's really where my initial energy went into, was asking the question, what do we do about loneliness? And of course, companion animals are a very ancient part of that answer to that question.
Wow. How did you think, did it just occur to you to bring in animals?
Well, I'll tell you, interesting little side story. Actually, not a lot of people know this, but at the time, and actually for many, many years after, I was living on a homestead. My wife and I were running a very small integrated farming operation with a small dairy operation and a flock of laying hens and a sawmill and
wow.
a maple syrup operation.
Cool.
So I was working on the farm and then going in to work with the elders, and I realized, wow, I get such joy out of being connected to nature. And when I come through those doors, nature stops at the front door. So I was really interested in how nature could come to live with the elders.
And so what happened? So you brought in all these animals, and what happened with the elderly people that were in the nursing home when you brought them in?
Well, there are a number of stories like this. So I think it's important to point out that some of the evidence we have that older people have a lot more in them than we sometimes recognize is that people came to life. People's eyes came to life. They started walking again, eating again. They had been really missing what really was an essential element of their humanity, and that is the fact of being connected to other living things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by restoring that connection, we actually brought, I'm not overstating it, I don't believe, we actually brought some people really fully into life. And one thing I would say is that in that initial research, we found that the mortality rate declined precipitously as after bringing the Eden alternative into the lives of the elders.
Wow. And I was reading that you actually had researchers come in and look at the effects of all this that you did.
Yeah.
And they did studies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I will say this. I love the fact that as human beings, there are dimensions of our existence that, sometimes defy explanation. I love that part of us. And I can equally say, and at the same time, I also love the human capacity to ask questions and to search for answers. And, so research has been a really important part of my work over the years because I want to do things that really work and that really have an impact.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's really, I mean, it's a testament to you that you actually not only did this, but then, hey, let's see what's, is it really working, or it's not just my imagination or my wishful thinking that, there's some science behind this that these 100 birds and dogs and cats and actually, and gardens actually did something.
Yeah, they really did.
So yeah, I was reading an article that you had posted about that the drug costs fell 38%.
Yeah. So here's I think a number. Let's start with a takeaway that listeners can apply.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In the American system of illness care, we often substitute medications for genuine human caring. And very often we find circumstances in which people who are people who are finding a source of suffering in their life, the response is to provide a medication when, for example, as we're talking about here, the answer might actually have been a need for connection. The drugs are powerful and in many ways very effective, but too many drugs, the wrong dose, and you have a calamity on your hands.
Yeah, sure. I would think actually a natural quote, this would be a natural, the solution would be certainly better than an artificial one, which I would consider to be drugs. I mean, at least in my mind. And
again, I love the fact that I'm getting a chance to be with your listeners, and I know that you have listeners who have been with you a long time. Let me just say that I favor any intervention that has a high degree of benefit and a low degree of risk.
Oh, sure.
If you can give me that, I'm all for it. If that happens today to come in a pill form, that's fine with me. But there are lots of other approaches that can give you lots of benefit at low risk. And I think our current system often discriminates against those solutions. And a big part of my work has actually been working outside of pharmacotherapy inside the world of the spirit, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, well, yeah, I think most of us would agree. And, there's a place for the natural and a place for, thank God, for the Western medicine that we have.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up to our break.
Okay.
And after our break,
that was fun.
It was. We're going to have more, actually. And when we come back, I'd love to talk to you about more of the work that you've done and, how we can take away some of the things that you've learned and help ourselves and maybe the people we know that are elderly. So we'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
You're listening to OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Listening to Between Heaven and Earth Radio. And I am here with Dr. Bill Thomas, who is an expert on aging. And we're talking about changing the way we look at aging, the way we look at getting older. Benjamin Franklin said, quote, all would live long, but none would be old. so that's funny. My son actually gave me that quote. And so, Dr. Thomas, you wrote a book called "What Are Old People For? How Elders Will Save the World." What is it we can look forward to in our quote elderhood? Is there anything good about being old?
Well, being a geriatrician and having spent decades in the company of very
Mm-hmm.
old people, I actually think there's a few things that our culture misunderstands about aging. I think, number one, our culture transmits a message that says aging equals decline. In other words, that decline and aging are the same thing, that aging includes only decline. And that message, of course, comes across in many different ways through the media, popular language, the jokes people make, and so on.
Mm.
And then the counter to that is actually this more interesting notion that aging is a process of growth, that we have one style of growth for about the first 3 decades of our life. And it's fascinating and in some ways really exciting. And then at the very end of our 20s, we actually shift gears. There's a lot of physiological evidence for this. Our bodies shift gears and we start growing in a different way. And the name we use to describe that kind of growth is aging. So
So we start aging at 30?
Oh, yeah. Actually, late 20s, really.
Wow.
About 28. So
That used to be the big number, right? 30.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So now there's a reason for it.
Indeed. So people who are 30 have already been aging for a couple of years. And they're starting a new decade with their body being in a different physiological space. So that period of maturation, which had felt so familiar to them, to us, and so comfortable, uncomfortable in some ways, but comfortable in other ways, that stops. And we become people living with aging. And so what happens is aging includes elements of decline, elements of loss, but so does maturation. So does that first part of life. There's also things that we lose, things we give up. If you can remember, for example, when a person is in childhood, I remember this personally. I was in childhood and I had cousins who were in adolescence. I remember looking at them and going, oh my God, I never want that to happen to me. That looks horrible.
Right, or they're so old too.
Yeah. And then, I got there and I lost many of my childhood characteristics, and many of the things about the child version of me went away. And we can even phrase it this way. The childhood version of me went into decline and I became an adolescent. So, that's okay. There's complexity there.
We go through phases. Actually Wayne Dyer used to talk about that, about how we are the same person, but we're not.
Right.
That, we're not the same person that we were when we were a child or when we were in our 30s.
And I think we can layer, I think that's a very apt insight on his part. But, what we're layering on here is that there's growth across the lifespan. So people who are in their 70s are growing as human beings. And I think a lot of people in their 70s listen to your show and appreciate it because it helps them grow. And our culture doesn't really allow for that.
So we're continuing to grow in all phases. Is that what you're saying? It's just different?
It's different. That's the thing. So what happens is we sort of say to older people, hello, we stopped the clock on your growth. You don't get to grow
just
anymore.
because you're old.
Yeah.
Old, quote, old, whatever old is.
Right. Well,
it's relative.
From a geriatrician's point of view, if you're older than 28, you're old.
Because you're starting to decline at 30.
Well, look at it this way too. I happen to be 56 years old. And I tell people, and it's correct, I tell people that I am an old man. And I really am an old man. If you look at all the people on earth who ever lived, I'm one of the oldest. Now,
Right.
there's people right now living today who are 40 years older than me. That's true.
Yeah.
And maybe someday maybe I'll be that old, or maybe I won't. I have no idea. But the point is, I've already outlived most of the humans,
Right.
age-wise, whoever walked the earth.
Well, and it's perspective, though, right? I mean, like I'm 55 actually.
Oh, wow!
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And I think I remember way back when I was a child, I was sitting on the driveway with my best friend, and we were 7. We're still friends, actually. She's like my sister, but we talk about it. It's like, and you were going, wow, 12 is like so
12.
old.
12, man.
Oh my
No,
God.
man,
What are you
no.
going to do when you're like 8, and then 12? So, and then when you're in your 20s, you think 50 is like, oh my God, that's so old. And,
Uh-huh.
and then I look at my parents, and they had me a little later in life. So my dad is 96 and he's still with us, and my mother's 88. And I think, wow, that's so old,
Right.
And in fact, when one time, I was sharing with you earlier, we were I took my dad to the ER for some minor thing, and the doctor says, well, your dad is what we in the medical profession call extremely old. And I didn't know there was a classification for that. But, you look at different phases in your life. And now that I'm 55, I don't think I'm old. I don't feel old.
Right. But let me just say, the 30-year-old version of yourself would be horrified.
Absolutely. So what are we looking forward to when we're, 65, 75, 85?
So here's a couple of things. So there's 2 things. So again, let's go back to a practical concept that is useful to people who love your show. There's a fancy word, which I'll give you the fancy word, and then I'll tell you what it really means. There's something called diachronic vision. Diachronic means across time. And what it really means is, how good are we at thinking about and envisioning our future self? And the answer is, we are terrible at it. The only thing humans seem to be able to do is to imagine a future self that's just about almost exactly like your current self.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, when you ask people of different ages, how old is old? And if, like, you just gave a great example, we just talked to your 7-year-old self, and your 7-year-old self was pretty mortified by 12. That seemed really out there. If you do the math and you ask this question across the lifespan, people say old is about 15 years older than they are right now. So a person, I'm just giving an example, a person who is 80 will say, oh, mid-90s, that's old. But what happens to the 80-year-old is that you're living inside this 80-year-old body that's yours, that belongs to you, that really well. It might be having some different issues, but it. And it's you, and it's your body. So what our society often does is estranges us from our future self. And we come to only believe in the value of the person we are today in this body. And I'll conclude here just to say, so if we think about Lisa Kay's 70-year-old self, I'll tell you something. Your 70-year-old self is going to be incredibly cool and awesome. And your 70-year-old self is going to say, old age, yeah, that's mid-80s, right? No problem. And so if we wake up to these things, it allows us actually to have more joy at the age we are right now.
Yes, because we have a perspective of that as we're going through time, that it sounds like things aren't going to be too different in how we look at our future, but looking at our past. I mean, I think one of the things is it's interesting because when I first started with OMTimes magazine, the very first article I ever wrote for them was called "Older is Better."
Oh, no kidding!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was trying to think about what is better for me, and one of the things I found is, and I think you've written about this, is that you get calmer because you know more.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's
There's
going to happen.
actually there is a lot of research on this. I'm glad you brought it up. Um, there's a lot of research about happiness. And there's something that's been identified called the U-bend of happiness, which anybody alive today can recognize. And that is, you start off early life. Actually, I'm talking about populations of people. We start off generally pretty happy. Sure, some people are unhappy, but most people are pretty happy. Then happiness starts going down, and it goes down during our 30s, and it goes down during our 40s. And the statisticians tell us that the unhappiest year of life, statistically speaking, is 47.
47.
Yes. So the good news for you and me, we're on the other side of that 47. We're on the other side of the 40s.
Because it goes up.
Oh, it goes up. And not
Wow.
only does it go up, the happiest decade of life, statistically speaking, is the 70s.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
And not and very close after that is the 80s.
Really? So it doesn't
Yes.
drop off too much. I have
No.
to say, my dad, who's 96, and my dad has dementia, but he's not, totally gone. I mean, he's very present. He's in the now. He has
Right.
no short-term memory. But he used to be very anxious and worry all the time and
Right.
pessimistic, and that because he's in the now,
Yeah.
he can't worry because he forgets what to worry about.
Yeah.
And he's just
Actually,
here. And
that's
and then, and so, and it seems like he's peaceful, he's content, and he's 96, and he doesn't know what he has to do in the morning when he gets up. You have to tell him,
Right.
okay, we're going to go have breakfast, and, you have to
Yeah.
get dressed and all that stuff. But you talk to him. So, Dad, how are you doing? Oh, I'm okay. I'm fine.
doing all right.
Before it used to be, oh, the pain. I'm old. Anyway, we're going to go to break, and when we come
Okay.
back, we're going to tell everybody where you can learn more about Dr. Thomas and maybe even see some of the work he's doing. So hang in there. We'll be right back.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Radio. And we are here with Dr. Bill Thomas, and we're talking about aging. But we're at our half-hour mark, and so I'm going to do some announcements, as we usually do at our half-hour break, and let you know what's going on. I've got one event that's coming up soon. It's called the Awakening to Life Telesummit, a roadmap to living your purpose, sharing your gifts, and leaving a legacy. And this is a series of online talks starting April 18th, in which my colleagues and I are going to share tips and tools for free and give you also additional free gifts to inspire and empower you to transform your life now. And you can get some exciting details about that at awakeningtolifesummit.com. And I'm going to be speaking on April 21st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'll be sharing with you how to develop your intuition so you can make it happen when you want, on what you want, and get clear, understandable information you can use. So that's coming up. That's very exciting. And also, if you want to reach me, you can get me at my website at lmk88.com. So those are my initials, lmk88.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get a cool little ebook on basics on how to develop your intuition, and also 16 free exercises that you can use at home, anywhere you are, to develop yours. So again, that's lmk88.com. And I wanted to share with you our guest's information, Dr. Bill Thomas. You can get him at drbillthomas.org, and that's DRBILLTHOMAS.org, drbillthomas.org. And he has a series of tours that he does. Apparently, Dr. Thomas travels the country, I believe, dozens and dozens of cities to do touring and bringing his message to people. And this year, he's got the Age of Disruption tour. It's sponsored by AARP, Main Street Investments, Kimberly-Clark, and others, and has a few events that are associated with that. So, Dr. Thomas, could you tell us a little bit about your tour?
I would love to. I guess I would just really say my goal in life is to change aging, and I feel like I've done that in my practice and with the people I've been lucky enough to be in partnership with, patients and families. But it's going to take more than that. And so I actually have made a transition in my career at this age. I'm now a wandering minstrel. And I travel with a tremendous company of performers and thinkers and presenters, ranging, I think our age range is 28 to 71. And we go city to city to city on a rock and roll tour bus and visit people in communities and perform at local theaters. So since we're on live radio, I'll just say next week we're going to be in the Carolinas and up into Virginia. Wrapping up next Friday, we'll be in Richmond, Virginia, and then Blacksburg, Virginia on Saturday. So.
Wow. And what is it that you're doing? I mean, you're wandering minstrel, and what is it that you guys are talking about, or, what can people expect when they go to watch it?
The number one thing we say to people is that it won't be what you expected. We call what we do nonfiction theater. So we love theater. We love the ancient wisdom of theater.
The storytelling, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it's the best.
Yeah.
When you have an idea that sticks around in very pure form for thousands of years, you're like, that's got something. So
yeah, well, everybody loves stories.
Yeah, so we do nonfiction theater where we have lights and sound and music and costumes and props and sets. And we're telling a story about a new vision of aging. We're telling a story that actually puts growth and human development back into the equation, so that it isn't just a discussion of decline, which I actually think would be very boring and sad. It's actually the question, and we do a performance called life's most dangerous game.
Hmm.
And your dad is playing life's most dangerous game. You and I are playing
We
life's most
are?
dangerous game. Oh yeah.
What is that, like just living or?
Yeah, aging.
Oh, we're aging.
Yeah. It's a very dangerous game.
Why?
So, well, it has 100% mortality rate.
Ah,
So that makes it
Yeah.
dangerous right there.
that's for sure.
I mean, just think if pro hockey had 100% mortality rate. They
Nobody
would be like,
play.
no way, man. So your dad, your mom, you, me, we're playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah, we're just living, and soon we won't be.
Yeah. So and that's one of the beauties of aging is actually living in a way that is conscious of
Yes.
mortality. I mean, young people,
Conscious living.
Ah,
Conscious. Well, that's our tagline: conscious living. For
well, that's what
yourself.
it is. Yeah. So older people actually can be, not everybody, but older people can be really good at that. They can excel at the art of conscious living. So our tour and our performances are really about consciousness raising, really about entertainment, about laughs, about music, about dancing, about celebration, about art. My point of view is I practiced with a lot of joy and energy for about 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now if I'm favored in my health, I would love to travel the world for 25 years spreading joy and happiness around the topic of aging.
Wow, that's conscious living. And
Yeah.
And why do you think older people are better at that? At conscious living?
Well,
Is it 'cause they've
you
lived a
put your
long
finger.
time?
Well, no, living a long time is not necessarily
No,
that
not everybody.
good.
Yeah, it doesn't always give you enlightenment, as we have seen, right?
Well, I will tell you, being a geriatrician, I have seen plenty of old fools. I mean, there's no shortage. So it isn't just the time. I think what it is the people I've known who've been the wisest people I've ever met had very little to do with formal education, very little. The wise people I've met are the ones who came to terms in a very visceral, fundamental way, came to terms with their own mortality and began to live, as you said, consciously in this body, in this time, in this moment. And in doing so, discovered depth that really wasn't available to them as a younger person.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. It's sort of like that accumulation of experience and knowledge, and the knowledge doesn't have to be book knowledge.
No.
Right? It's life knowledge. And
right.
I think
So I'll tell you something my patients taught me over the years. Wisdom, which is a term that's bandied around a lot, wisdom is really insight into the problems of everyday living.
Oh, wow.
And-
wow. Your patients told you that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Wow.
So this idea that that's the essence of life that you can only extract with a considerable amount of experience and enough release on your own ego so that you know that you're going to be gone. So every day that you're living is a day lived in that knowledge. It sounds terrible.
No, but
it turns out to be very, very liberating.
well, they see those people who realize came very close to death, and now they live their lives more fully because they know it's really in their face. And I think, the wisdom that comes with being older, and when then you learn what to worry about or what not to worry about, and so that you can be free of maybe these other burdens of things that are filling your mind that you don't need to be filled with. I was thinking about my mother-in-law many years ago. I was sitting in the dining room and I was reading the newspaper, and so I guess I was in my 20s, and all the horrible things that are going on in the world, and oh my God, Armageddon's coming, and World War III, and da 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 da, and I was genuinely worried, and I said, I don't know, all this stuff that's happening, it's really kind of scary. World War III is like around the bend, and she wasn't worried. I said, how come you're not worried? And she said, Oh, because that happens all the time. That's been happening all the time, and they keep talking about that, and it doesn't.
And here we are.
And here we are. And it shocked me. It's like, wow, really, you're not scared, and she wasn't, and she's right now. 30 years later. So
there's always a calamity down the road. There's no question.
Always, there's something that I guess part of our psyche that wants us to, ensure that we're okay. But there is something about that wisdom, and I think actually, I believe now. I admit we've got you on the show very quick, so I didn't get a chance to get your book or get to read it. And I really
that's all good. No worries.
But I think your latest book, Second Wind: Navigating the Passage to a Slower, Deeper, and More Connected Life, has some of those messages.
It sure does.
Right?
Your mom was on to it.
Really.
So really, what I'm really saying is that we were talking earlier about aging in terms of virtue. In American culture, it's very difficult to talk about slowness as a virtue.
Yes.
So one thing aging offers us, if we are willing to partake, is a guided tour of slow. And those who are willing to explore what that makes available actually have an opportunity to find a reservoir of well-being there. And of course, our culture sends the opposite message, which is fast is always good and faster is always better. So aging provides an antidote for those willing and able to tolerate it. And so in the book, I really do talk about the virtue of slow. And there are a number of writers right now today, I think, tackling slow and slowness in a really new and really positive light. I really love it.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. Well, we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the wonderful things that Dr. Thomas has initiated to help us in our old age. We'll be right back.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
The name is Bond, James Bond.
No, the name is Joe, The Joe Show. And we are returning back for our 9th season here on OMTimes Radio. So tune in every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on OMTimes.com/mobile. You can take us wherever you go. Yeah!
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
And welcome back. I'm Lisa Kay, and you're listening to Between Heaven and Earth Radio. And we are talking about aging with Dr. Bill Thomas, who is basically revolutionizing the way we look at being older and what we can do to change that paradigm of the way we've been looking at elderly or coming of age, becoming older, right?
The second coming of age.
The second coming of age, most definitely. So I know you've done so much work with things like the greenhouses, and I believe the other one was the Eden Alternative. I wanted to talk a little bit about that and what you've been doing, this new concept of, okay, now we are all the elderly now. We get there. What do we have to expect? And what was the concept behind it? You were talking about as we get older, one of the things we do is we learn about conscious living being slower. What should society, you think, or what should we do as society, as people, to help our elders?
Well, I think I can say a couple of things that I think are super.
Yeah, that was a
important.
broad thing.
Yeah,
I
I'll start because I like to start. Being my background as a practicing physician means that my bias is toward practicality. I mean, that's what you do all day, is do the best you can to help people sort through difficult situations. But the best way to start in terms of the question you just asked is to look into the mirror, examine your face, and to say, my face is exactly right. It looks exactly the way the face of in my case, 56-year-old man looks. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So the first thing you can do to help elders is to heal the estrangement that culture enforces between us and our own true authentic self. Because in culture, our culture sends a different message, which is you're supposed to look into the mirror and go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's horrible.
Yes.
And I understand that, and I understand where that pressure comes from. But I also, because I've hung around with older people all the time, your 55-year-old self is fabulous. Wow, you look great. And why not enjoy it now? Why wait till you're 70 and go, oh my God, look at that picture from 2016. I looked so great. Well, you do look great right now, I'm telling you. So that's the first thing. Do what you can to heal the estrangement between your own self and your self-image.
Yes.
The second thing is to appreciate, when I think one of the great lessons of aging is that relationships matter far more than possessions, far more than material things, actually far more than esteem and accomplishment. At the end of the day, and I can say this having spent a lot of time with people, very old people, very near the end of their lives, relationships matter more than anything else. So how do we cultivate relationships in our life, knowing that actually very old people tell us that's what matters? And then the third thing, if I may, simple, but the third thing is that to acknowledge that when we talk about helping older people, we're really talking about participating in an ancient human cultural practice that is probably as old as humanity, that nurturing and sustaining older people is actually one of the hallmarks of our human species. No other species does it in anything like the fashion we do. And it's actually sacred work, and it's precious, and it's valuable. And to the degree we're able to conceive of it in those terms, we're much more capable of recognizing the dignity and purpose in that.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the third? Because I kind of get the first and the second,
Sure.
The mirror thing and relationships.
Okay, so
explain the third one a little
the
more.
third one really has to do with a lot of the work that surrounds older people is based on tasks.
Okay.
So professional caregivers and sometimes family caregivers focus their energy around accomplishing tasks. And too often, and older people will tell you this as well, too often the personhood of the elder is lost.
Well, what would a task be? I mean, a task for the elder, would it be, I don't know.
Getting dressed.
Or taking a bath or...
Taking a bath.
That's the big one, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a big one, sure.
Yeah.
Bathing is a ritual that has, it's very vulnerable type of experience. It's also very, it can be extremely pleasant. Many people really enjoy their bathing rituals. And in late life...
Some people don't. Well, yeah, when they get old, right?
Well, when people, in late life, one of the things that happens is many people find that others are now part of their bathing rituals where they were conducted in private for many decades. So it really takes a person who's focused, a caregiver who's focused on the inherent dignity of the elder to be an assistant in that bathing ritual. That's very different than giving a patient a bath.
See, that's it. That's so, I mean, that resonates a lot because my mother, she had actually fallen and broken her sacrum. And so then she was in rehab for a while. But rehab, the only place that you go to rehab is nursing homes. So she was in a nursing home, and we were, I was sitting in her room with her, and you could hear this older lady, there we go.
Older than you.
Oh, yeah, older than, and she was screaming.
Oh.
Don't want to take a shower. No, you're not going to take a bath. I don't want one. No, you're
listen.
killing me.
Oh, yeah.
And even like I know my father, he doesn't always want to take a bath. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I mean,
then we focus on, you got to take a bath. You have to. You got to get clean.
Okay. Now this is, I have to drop the hammer on this because you just said, as correctly in the example you gave, there was a case where somebody was putting the task ahead of the person. Number two, they were offering an either-or fallacy. Either you let me strip you and wash you at this time because it's convenient for me, and I'll do it in a fashion that is efficient for me, or you'll be labeled and perhaps even medicated as a non-compliant, difficult patient.
Right. So what do you do? What do you do instead?
Well, here's the thing. So the answer to that question is really culture and education. So I can tell you that there are organizations and people and professionals in America who would be horrified at what you just described, and that they actually operate in such a way that you said, how do you stay clean? Well, how you stay clean and getting dunked in a tub, those are not necessarily the same. And in fact, in some cases for older people, frequent bathing can actually cause all kinds of skin problems. And there are beautiful techniques where a skilled caregiver can help somebody keep completely clean and yet protect their modesty, do the bath in bed using some new materials and they have residue-less shampoo that doesn't need to be rinsed. It's just really great stuff. If they're properly educated and supported, and if the culture they're part of puts the person first and the task second.
So that's the key, that it's not the task, it's all about the person. And in that case, so putting the person first, does that mean putting yourself in their shoes?
Well,
does that mean?
Understanding, I was recently visiting, I was out on tour in Santa Fe, and I visited Sierra Vista, which is this unbelievably cool, awesome home. And I use that word, home for 24 elders who happened to be living with dementia. And when we pulled up out front, they had 2 goats in the yard. They do the Eden alternative. And I walked inside. At the front door, there had a sign that said, in any given situation, the reality of the elder is the reality that prevails.
Wow.
And that was on the front door. And that meant that when you walk through the store, that reality of that elder at this moment, that's the reality we deal with, not our reality. So back to your thing about the woman screaming, they were violating that law.
So that sums it up. I mean, that to me was like the bing, the aha, the light went on. Now I get it. So that's a wonderful place to end. We're at the end of our show.
Holy cow.
But that's the message, right? To put
you bet, Lisa.
Put them first. Wow. Thank you so much for being on the show. I think your message is just absolutely so important for all of us because we're all, going to get there.
Well, I'm already old, so.
Yeah, well, so am I. I'm right there with you.
Going to get older. That's right. That's my plan. Thank
you so much. If you settle down from your traveling minstrel stuff and you're ready to do another show, I'd love for you to come back. We'll have a great talk. You've been listening to Between Heaven and Earth Radio, a conscious living for your soul, whether you're young or old. So we're right here on OMTimes Radio. Tune in next time. Angel blessings to everyone. Thanks for listening.